Hey there, and welcome to DIY Projects with Pete. In today's episode, we'll walk through the process of how to build a sofa table. This is a fun and simple project I really think you're going to enjoy. It's affordable to make, and it's going to look great in your home. I want to thank 3M WorkTunes Connect Hearing Protection for sponsoring today's video. I've been wearing their headphones to protect my ears for about the last year now. They work great, they have a modern design, they're comfortable to wear, and I wear them all the time when I'm out in the shop, when I'm on the skid steer, out on the mower, snow blowing, or around any loud tools. One of my favorite features is the Bluetooth technology that lets you seamlessly stream entertainment from your mobile phone and any other Bluetooth-enabled device, so you can listen to your favorite songs and podcasts while out working. They also have an integrated microphone that lets you make and take phone calls without removing the hearing protection, which is super convenient. If you'd like to pick up a pair this holiday season, check out the link in the description, and let's get started with today's project. We'll start by measuring the 2x6 board, which is going to be used to create the sofa table's top. I decided to do a 54-inch long top and cut the board at a 90-degree angle on the miter saw to create two boards that will later be connected. A 2x6 board actually measures 5.5 inches in width, so when connected, the tabletop will be 11 inches in width by 1.5 inches thick. We'll attach the boards to each other using pocket holes and screws. This makes the table go together quickly, and it's a real simple process. Measure every 6 to 8 inches on the underside of the boards to determine placement. Next, set the jig for 1.5 inch thick stock and start drilling the holes. Now, feel free to use biscuits, dowels, or other more advanced joinery techniques if you have the tools and the skills. I used a scrap block of wood to help hold the board level and then drilled a hole at each mark. Each side hole is about 2 inches in from the end of the board. Slide the board after each hole is drilled until they're all made. You'll notice I did 2 holes close together, which was a little bit of a mistake on my part, but they won't be seen since this is the underside of the table, and it won't be a big deal once it's assembled. Go ahead and clean up your work area to make sure you have a nice flat surface prior to making the tabletop. Then hold the boards together with a couple clamps and insert 2.5 inch long pocket hole screws. This process goes super quick, and in just a few minutes, your tabletop will be ready. The next step is to make the legs, and I started by cutting each leg down to 35 inches with 90-degree cuts so I could take a look at how I wanted to orientate them before making the beveled cuts. If all your boards look nice on each side, simply cut each leg in the same manner and then flip them so they're orientated correctly in the end. If you'd prefer to have a certain side out, I'd recommend labeling each board to help ensure the cuts are made correctly. We'll set the bevel to 6 degrees and the angle to 3 degrees for our leg cuts. The cuts will be made parallel to each other. Now the total height of my table is about 31 inches, so I measured 29.5 inches from the long point to the short point for each of the legs and cut them parallel to each other. Continue this process for each of the 4 legs. I did find that these angles worked really well for someone looking to have a more narrow sofa table without the legs protruding out from the tabletop too much. When the cuts are all made, go ahead and stand them up to see how they'll be orientated. You may need to flip them around a couple times to get them in the correct position, but they should angle out from the table in both directions if done correctly. Next, we'll make the short horizontal pieces that will connect the legs. We'll turn the bevel back to 0 degrees and put the angle to 3 degrees. The 2 pieces connecting the legs at the top will be 3 inches from short point to short point, and the 2 longer pieces will be 5.25 inches from short point to short point. These cuts are not made parallel to each other. Next, drill pocket holes on the ends of each of these shorter pieces. Now, we don't have a whole lot of room to work with on these smaller pieces, so you'll want to be a little more strategic about where the holes are placed. I'd recommend 2 pocket holes on each end of the boards. Most of these pocket holes are somewhat hidden once assembled, but you can certainly fill them in or add wood plugs to them to help blend them in, like I do toward the end of the project. And once complete, we'll use wood glue and 2.5 inch long screws to connect everything. The small piece up top should be flush with the top of the legs on the outside as seen here. Now that the top pieces are attached, we'll attach the lower piece. This should be placed approximately 4 inches up from the bottom of the legs. These are again attached using wood glue and screws, and after being assembled, stack the end leg units against each other to make sure they are both the same size and that they match up nicely. Next, I determined placement for the legs on the underside of the tabletop and decided to place them 2 inches in from the left and right side of the table. I then marked the location and measured in an additional 1.5 inches to accommodate for the leg width. Then I measured the distance from the inside of each leg and unit to determine the length to cut the horizontal support piece. Short to short end was 46.5 inches with the bevel set to 6 degrees and the miter angle to 0 degrees. Next, drill 2 holes on the underside of each end on the horizontal board, and then you can attach it using wood glue and 2.5 inch long screws. Now that the 2 end leg units are attached, we can take a measurement for the lower board. This will be cut with the same 6-degree bevel cut. Repeat the pocket hole process and then prepare to attach it to the legs. After making the cuts, I usually will lightly sand the cut ends to remove rough edges, and when connecting it, don't use wood glue for this piece yet, since we'll be removing it in a later step to be able to get the rebar in. Next, we'll attach the base to the tabletop from the underside, determine placement, and then add some wood glue around the top of the base. Next, pre-drill through the wood and use 2.5 inch long wood screws to attach the base to the underside of the tabletop. I used about 5 or 6 screws for this. For additional support, I added a screw at an angle at each corner, pre-drill at an angle, and then insert a 2.5 inch long screw. We'll add some 1/2 inch rebar to give the table an industrial and a rustic feature. I cut it slightly long to make sure I'd have enough, and I used an angle grinder with a cutoff blade, but use whatever tool you have available to cut metal. Find the center of the table and then measure 1.5 inches to the left and right of the center point. Hold the rebar to get it at the approximate angle you want it to be at, then drill a 1/2 inch diameter hole at that approximate angle. The hole should be about 1 inch or so deep, and you may need to bore it out a bit to get the perfect angle. After these holes are created, flip the table right side up, hold up the rebar again to get that approximate angle, and then bore additional holes on the board for the rebar. These were placed 2 inches in from the end of the lower board. Go ahead and remove the screws from one end of the board and put the piece of rebar in place. You may need to trim down the rebar to get the perfect fit. I found that about 31.5 inches worked real well for the final size. Put it in the upper and lower holes and then secure the board back in place with the screws. And then repeat the process on the other side. To help hold the rebar firmly in place and prevent it from turning, I used a 2-part epoxy in all 4 of the holes. It set up in about 5 minutes and worked real well to get a nice tight fit. I sprayed a clear sealer on the rebar to give it a finished touch. I then used a few pocket hole plugs to fill a couple of the holes, and they go in really easily in combination with a bit of wood glue. I then sanded the sofa table to smooth the surfaces, to remove rough edges, and to get rid of any writing and print on the wood. I mixed up some dark brown and gray stain to get a color I was happy with and applied it with a brush. I then wiped away the excess and let it dry. Lastly, I sealed the sofa table with 2 coats of polyurethane, sanding between each coat. And that's all there was to it. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode on how to build a sofa table. If you did find it helpful, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any ideas for upcoming projects you'd like to see, please comment below. Again, if you're looking for a great gift idea this holiday season, definitely check out the 3M WorkTunes Connect hearing protection. They work great, and I love to have them around the shop. All right, thanks again for watching, and cheers from Montana.